For centuries, the legend of Atlantis has captured our imaginations. It's a tantalizing story of a utopian island civilization, incredibly advanced, that vanished beneath the waves in a single, catastrophic day and night. We've all seen the documentaries, read the speculative books, and maybe even dreamt of discovering its sunken palaces and gleaming crystal towers. It's the ultimate ancient mystery, a puzzle that has lured explorers, mystics, and dreamers for over 2,000 years. But what if I told you that the entire quest for Atlantis is based on a fundamental misunderstanding? What if the truth isn't buried under miles of ocean, but hidden in plain sight within the pages of an ancient philosophical text? Today, we're not going on a deep-sea expedition to find Atlantis. Instead, we're going on a historical and scientific journey to understand why it was never there to begin with. We're going to separate fact from fiction, strip away the layers of myth, and reveal how a simple philosophical allegory, a thought experiment, transformed into one of the most enduring and captivating legends of all time. Prepared to have your perception of this lost city completely The entire story of Atlantis comes from one single source: the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. He wrote about it in two of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, around 360 BC. In these texts, Plato, through his characters, describes Atlantis as a powerful and noble naval power located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which is what the ancients called the Strait of Gibraltar. This island kingdom was said to be larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined. It was a marvel of engineering and social structure, with a magnificent capital city built on concentric rings of land and water, boasting incredible temples, palaces, and a sophisticated canal system. The Atlanteans were a formidable force, descended from the sea god Poseidon himself. But, as the story goes, their divine nature became diluted over time. They grew corrupt, greedy, and filled with hubris. Their ambition led them to wage war against ancient Athens, which Plato portrays as the ideal, virtuous state. Just as the righteous Athenians repelled the Atlantean invasion, a terrible cataclysm struck. Violent earthquakes and floods consumed the island of Atlantis, causing it to sink into the sea, disappearing forever. Now, this sounds like a pretty compelling historical account, right? Plato even gives specific details, dates, and genealogies. He claims the story was passed down through generations, originating from the Athenian statesman Solon, who supposedly heard it from Egyptian priests. This is where the allure begins. The detail makes it feel real. However, it's crucial to understand the context. Plato was a philosopher, not a historian. His writings were often allegorical, using fictional stories to illustrate his philosophical ideas about politics, justice, and the ideal state. Most scholars, both in ancient times and today, agree that the story of Atlantis was exactly that. An allegory? It was a cautionary tale. Atlantis represented the corrupt, materialistic, and expansionist empire, while ancient Athens represented Plato's vision of a perfect, modest, and philosophically governed society. The story's dramatic conclusion. Atlantis being destroyed by divine punishment for its arrogance was a powerful way for Plato to warn his fellow Greeks about the dangers of imperial overreach and moral decay. His own student, Aristotle, one of the greatest minds of the ancient world, dismissed Atlantis as a complete fabrication, stating that the man who dreamed it up also made it disappear. For nearly 2,000 years after Plato, almost no one took the story of Atlantis literally. It was understood as a myth, a piece of philosophical fiction. So, if Atlantis was just a philosophical fable, how did it become a global obsession? A lost city that people actively search for? The modern myth of Atlantis really took off in the 19th century, thanks to a man named Ignatius Donnelly. In 1882, Donnelly, an American politician, an amateur writer, published a book called Atlantis, The Antediluvian World. This book was a sensation. Donnelly argued that Plato's account was literal history. He proposed that Atlantis was a real, highly advanced civilization, the mother culture, from which all other ancient civilizations, like the Egyptians and the Mayans, drew their knowledge. He claimed that Atlanteans invented everything from metallurgy to the alphabet, and that a few survivors of the cataclysm spread this knowledge around the world. Donnelly cherry-picked similarities between disparate cultures like pyramids in Egypt and Mexico, and presented them as definitive proof of a common Atlantean origin. He essentially created the modern template for all Atlantis theories to come, a technologically superior, lost mother civilization. His book ignored all scientific and historical evidence to the contrary, but it was incredibly popular. It tapped into a romantic fascination with lost worlds and ancient wisdom. And from that point on, Atlantis was reborn, not as an allegory, but as a historical destination waiting to be reached. Donnelly's ideas opened the floodgates for all sorts of fringe theories. In the 20th century, Atlantis became entangled with occultism, New Age, spirituality, and pseudoscience. Mystics like Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, claimed to have psychic visions of Atlantis, describing it as a society powered by giant energy crystals. Others connected it to the Bermuda Triangle, aliens, and all kinds of paranormal phenomena. The story kept evolving, with each new theorist adding their own layer of fantasy. But what about the physical evidence? Surely, if a continent-sized island with a sophisticated civilization sank into the ocean, it would leave some trace, right? Well, this is where science delivers the final blow to the myth. Geologically speaking, the idea of a large continent sinking into the Atlantic Ocean in a short period is impossible. The theory of plate tectonics, which is the foundation of modern geology, shows us that continents drift slowly over millions of years. They don't just sink. The seafloor of the Atlantic has been mapped extensively, and there is simply no evidence of a sunken continent. There are no vast underwater ruins, no submerged mountain ranges that match Plato's description. The geological reality of our planet's crust does not allow for a story like Atlantis to have happened. Despite the lack of geological evidence, many people have tried to connect the Atlantis story to a real historical event. The most popular and scientifically plausible candidate is the eruption of the volcano on the Greek island of Thera, now known as Santorini, around 1600 BC. This was one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history. It caused a massive tsunami that devastated the northern coast of the nearby island of Crete, which was the heart of the Minoan civilization. The Minoans were a highly advanced Bronze Age culture with impressive palaces, beautiful art, and a powerful navy. The eruption and subsequent tsunami would have been a catastrophic event, and it's thought to have contributed significantly to the decline of the Minoan civilization. There are some compelling parallels. A powerful island civilization destroyed by a natural disaster. It is possible that the memory of this real-life catastrophe was passed down through generations for over 1,000 years, eventually reaching Plato, who then incorporated elements of it into his fictional story. However, there are also major discrepancies. Thera is in the Aegean Sea, not the Atlantic Ocean. It's much smaller than the continent-sized Atlantis described by Plato, and the timeline is off by about 900 years from Plato's account. So, while the Minoan collapse might have provided some inspiration, Thera is not Atlantis. It's an echo, a possible seed of truth that grew into a much grander fictional tree. So, in the end, where does that leave us? The search for Atlantis isn't a quest for a physical place. It's a journey into the heart of human storytelling. Our fascination with utopias and our desire to believe in something magical just beyond the horizon of our known world. The legend of Atlantis tells us more about ourselves than it does about any ancient civilization. It reflects our anxieties about societal collapse, our dreams of a golden age of wisdom and technology, and our deep-seated love for a good mystery. The evidence is clear. There is no archaeological evidence, no geological trace, and no credible historical record of Atlantis outside of Plato's allegorical dialogues. The story was a philosophical tool, a work of fiction created to make a point. It was later resurrected and embellished by imaginative writers and mystics who built a mountain of myth on a molehill of fiction. The truth of Atlantis isn't that it's lost, but that it was never there to begin with. And honestly, isn't that a more fascinating story? The tale of how a philosopher's thought experiment could ripple through time, inspiring art, literature, and a global quest for a city that exists only in the realm of imagination. It's a testament to the power of a well-told story. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's greatest myths. If you enjoyed untangling this ancient puzzle, please hit that like button and subscribe for more journeys into history and science. What other myths would you like to see us debunk? Let me know in the comments below. See you next time!